We are Vineyard.
Why does anyone play the violin anymore? Because it is really hard to play the violin. It's a really long journey. Having accompanied two small children who the sound of whose playing caused me somewhat more pain than I ever let them see at that early formative stage. Like, why would you ever do that? The answer is you only do it if you've heard a violinist who plays really well, especially as a child, with that amazing kind of irrepressible, confidence almost of the child and humility of the child, willingness to learn and try. You're like, I want to learn how to do that. That's the function of being a spectator, is to say, oh my gosh, I watched Jay play golf and, I think I'll actually take up that sport. It was beautiful what he was able to do. I should learn that. And if I watched a great tennis player play, it should activate in me. I should go out and find someone just a little better than me and just learn the next step and, play. Yes. But instead, of course, what our media world gives us are these highly salient, the way the psychologists talk about it, emotionally rich experiences of observing, but that in that celebrity way do not cross the gap into inviting us into a formative life that would make us the kind of person who could do that. And that is the deepest tragedy of media. Is this, it just gives us every day a way to live vicariously through other people in a way that will never develop anything in us that could contribute good to the world or take us really closer to loving with heart, soul, mind, and strength, the way we're meant to do.
Welcome to the We Are Vineyard podcast, conversations to help us grow with Jesus and each other. In today's episode, Jay will be interviewing Andy Crouch, who is one of our speakers for our 2025 National Conference. Andy is also an author and partner for theology and culture at Praxis. Let's listen in.
Andy, thanks for joining us again. This is the first time we've done something where I'm not in your home with you.
I kind of feel like you're in my home with me. I have headphones in, so you're very much in my ears. So.
There it is. Okay, so yeah, we'll get to talk about technology in a minute. Am I in your home? Maybe I am in your home. It's an existential question, really, but what I would love to do is follow up a little bit on, we had you at our national conferences, again, in the same existential way. I guess in one sense, we brought the whole of the vineyard to your home, if you see it that way. Because we were in your home, or we brought you to our conference. I'm not sure which, a little of both. But it was really, really helpful thinking through order and abundance and what's it mean to be flourishing, and really timely for us, the stuff we're considering in the vineyard. And as always, you are gracious and helpful and kind to us. And you were one of our first podcasts too. We came to your home and recorded that, and so we basically keep chasing you around, I think, is the moral of the story, and you keep graciously talking to us. So I'm very, very grateful for you.
It's always a gift.
Yeah. And so put in the show notes, other podcasts, other stuff, so we don't have to go through all of your story. But I'd like to talk to you a little bit about a frame that I've seen you use more than once. So whether it's thinking weak and strong or order and abundance or whatever, I was trying to think. I think when we did the first podcast, you had like a second version of Weak and Strong, with another 2x2 grid. So you like using the 2x2 grids as a way of teaching through frameworks and concepts. Like, how did that start, or what is it that gets your fancy with that?
Oh man, this could be a very long podcast, because this could be like one of those epic Joe Rogan level multi-hour deep dives, because I really have been astonished at the fruitfulness of what is, when I first started using the 2x2, which I started using for authority and vulnerability, those are the words I use in my book, Strong and Weak.
Yep.
I was like, this is so cliche. MBAs and consultants like use 2x2s all the time. They're used a lot in marketing for positioning. And I was really a little embarrassed and it looks like a very simplistic tool, but what the sequence of what happened is I'd written a book called Playing God, which was an attempt to really think deeply about power from a Christian perspective and about power as a gift, but also about, of course, the corruptions of that gift. And in the course of that book, I had landed on these two ideas, authority and vulnerability, that in Playing God, I had already kind of connected with the image-bearing kind of nature of human beings, that we have more authority than any other creature by the gift and grace of God, and more vulnerability, interestingly, by any other creature. And the question is actually, is that also by the gift and grace of God? Like, is that a problem we need to overcome? That we're so vulnerable, that we're so dependent, that we're in infancy for so long, we're in old age for so long. Like, should we fix that? Or is our vulnerability also our nakedness? As in creation, Genesis 2, the man and the woman were naked, which is a word for a kind of vulnerability not used of any other creature. Since it's there in the garden, is it actually part of God's gift and grace that we're vulnerable as well? So that it all sort of flowed into how I was thinking about power. And I started needing to speak on that book, as one does, and try to teach the concepts from it. And one day I was preparing for a talk about some of the ideas in the book, specifically those, and among others. And I thought, oh, that's a 2x2. So I drew this initial 2x2. I tried it out with this particular audience, and it was so helpful. And then my editor called me or emailed me or whatever, and a few months later, and said, well, what he probably was thinking was, Playing God is an amazing book, but it's not selling that well. So is there anything else you can write? Because Playing God is kind of big, thick, somewhat forbidding book on a forbidding topic of power. And he said, is there anything that was in Playing God that is kind of on the cutting table, or you didn't get to it, you'd like to write, like a short book, a small book, a more accessible book? And I said, oh, there is like this 2x2. I want to write about it. So my book, Strong and Weak, is just playing out really the four corners of this grid with authority on the vertical axis and vulnerability on the horizontal. So that book sold way better than Playing God. It was way more helpful to people because it's such a fruitful, fertile framework to see our lives. But as you say, what I've since realized, and you've caught me in it several times, and believe me, if you hang around me, like these 2x2s just keep showing up in my life and my work, is I've discovered it is like a consistent pattern, not actually primarily for identifying the upper right, which is when you have both things together. So authority and vulnerability together, I would say, is what leads to real flourishing. That's the sort of premise of my book, Strong and Weak. But it actually turns out that it's this diagnostic tool to accurately name the distortions of our world that come when we fixate on one value at the expense of another. And just over and over, it's become this incredibly helpful tool. Now, I truly can keep going, but I know that podcasts are supposed to be like dialogues. So I feel like I should stop.
No, they don't have to be. No, podcast. What's actually true is it's a shill to get people to talk. You pretend like you're dialoguing as a mechanism to have people engage. That's all it really is. So no, I have lots of questions out of what you said. Too many questions, but I can see what you're saying, that it gets us to the upper right-hand corner. But it also helps us to see what it means that when we're out of balance and we just have one more than the other, or we lack both.
Yes.
But why else do you think that grid is helpful? What other kinds of things are you learning as you use that?
All right. So let me give you the universal 2x2 that is behind all others. As fundamental as authority and vulnerability is, it's
the
actually
Platonic form.
Yes, this is the Platonic form. There is a reason we put things on the y-axis and the x-axis in the 2x2s that I draw, and they're always two what I would want to call values, which is to say things that are truly valuable. So I would say, sticking with authority and vulnerability, that authority is truly valuable in human experience, and so is vulnerability, defined as exposure to meaningful risk. But one of them tends to be culturally dominant. Mm-hmm. That is, in a given cultural environment, it's the one that tends to win. And we put that on the vertical axis. And on the horizontal axis, we put a culturally subordinate value. That is one that, though valuable, tends to be ignored. So let me give you a different example from the world of business. If you talk to any business leader in the kind of modern era, they'll say, well, our business does have to make a profit, and so profits are important. But, our business is really about people. People are what make this company great, right?
Yeah, like you're at Starbucks, you're a partner.
If you work partner, at Starbucks. Right? Yeah. Exactly. So what are we saying here? We're saying two things matter in the world of business, and this is true. Profits matter because that is almost by definition, a business to exist long-term has to earn more than it costs to run it. And people matter. That is also undeniably true. There's no doubt it is the case. And it's said sincerely when the CEO, let's say, says it. The thing is, though, in a business environment, in your typical Western business environment, what tends to win when the chips are down? Like if you have to pit those values against each other, what wins? And the truth is, in many businesses, at many times, profits win or they tend to dominate. Who gets paid more? The VP of sales, which is the profit or revenue generating engine at least, or the VP of HR, which is the people thing. Sales gets paid more. Who tends to get promoted to CEO? The VP of sales. Like you can look at the system and you're like, okay, I get that both things matter, but when push comes to shove, profit tends to win. So I don't draw the 2x2 arbitrarily anymore. I always try to figure out in a given culture, which thing is kind of valued more. Now, actually, let me improv a Vineyard one here, okay?
I'm excited.
So this relates to some things you all are working through as a movement, and I'm not going to say the word denomination, but as a movement of churches.
Yes.
Flexibility and structure, okay? Mm-hmm. All organizations need some level of structure, and all organizations need flexibility. Now, in some organizational contexts, what's the dominant value? It's absolutely structure. So let's just say Presbyterians, for example.
Yeah.
Decently and in order is like the watchword. I had a professor in seminary who said that the Presbyterians had preserved outside of Scripture the disciples' answer to Jesus' question, "Can you not pray with me 1 hour?" The answer is yes, but not 1 minute more. Right. So
that's perfect.
Right. So Presbyterians, very high on order. Now, do Presbyterians need to be flexible? I mean, I suppose, but you don't see it happening a whole lot, and it's certainly not their dominant value. Now, when I think about the Vineyard as an outsider, but someone who's benefited so much from the Vineyard, I actually think the axes are reversed within the Vineyard. The whole premise of the Vineyard was availability and a kind of openness to the Spirit that wasn't expressed in many other Christian traditions. And do people know that you need to have structure? Well, of course we know that. But when push comes to shove, which is going to win? So this is contextual, okay? And actually, even authority and vulnerability in the kind of dominant culture of the West, authority, and in many cultures, I would say, authority tends to be the dominant value. But actually, there are certain times, and I would say I was in campus ministry for about 10 years, and I would say I don't know, maybe I don't even know which cohort or generation this was, but there were times in campus ministry when actually what students really wanted was vulnerability from their leaders, right? And maybe this was a Gen X thing or a late Gen X thing. Totally. And actually we were very suspicious of authority. So you can actually have situations where the dominant value is the opposite of another culture. Another massive one is me and we. This is the title of a great book by a friend of mine named Alvin Ung from Malaysia. And me, the individual, we, the collective. In the West, me is dominant and we is subordinate, even though we all know we need connections and relationships. But in Asia and what we sometimes call Eastern cultures, we is dominant and me is subordinate, right?
Yeah.
So the first way this tool gets really helpful is simply identifying in the context you're in which thing tends to win. And then your upper left is going to be when you have high on the dominant, but not much of the subordinate, right? And this is always the idolatry corner. So the upper, and it's also, by the way, in a way, what I would call the control corner, or the corner where we feel like we've got the power we need with less risk. So in some cultures, the collective is the dominant, and it's all collective and no individual. That's maybe, well, I mean, I suppose in a political sense, communism, for example, where the collective really understood as the state representing the collective, not the family or something like that, like takes over, and the individual is completely subordinated to that. That corner is always the danger corner. And if you are leading in a given context, if you're leading, now let's go back to the business where we say profits and people, but we all know profit kind of wins. The danger is kind of the supremacy of money in the upper left corner, where if I am not consciously thinking about how to lead in a way that restores the subordinate value of people, the whole system, the systems always drift towards the left. They drift towards the dominant thing winning. So it gives you a way to look at almost every situation and say, what are the values that need to be here that are in some measure of tension? And then you have to ask, how do I intervene to get us moving in the right direction? And it's not always simply talking about both of them. You often have to emphasize, and this is like Isaiah's vision, like every mountain and hill lowered, every valley raised. Like you've actually got to actively make room for that VP of HR to speak up in a meeting when the sales team is kind of dominating the conversation. I mean, if you think about the history of a lot of at least post-agricultural societies is one in which men are culturally dominant and women are culturally subordinate. Like but men and women are both needed for the human community to flourish. But because of the drift to the upper left, true leadership means finding ways to proactively like intervene in the system so that we don't lose that subordinate, that culturally subordinate value. Not that it's meant to be subordinate, but it just ends up that way.
Yeah.
And so I call the upper left corner, the coercive normal. It's how things tend to work when no one's really intervening to make sure it's healthy. We just do whatever is most profitable. We just let men lead and talk in every setting in every way. We just choose your dominant thing. It runs, it rules. And what it creates is the lower right becomes what I call the corner of frustrated potential. Because in fact, for that system or for this process to really flourish, you're going to need what that axis has. Like you need your HR team, or at least you need people. HR sometimes becomes its own center of idolatry in its own way. Yeah. And by the way, that's part of the story is the lower right corner starts to fight back and so HR starts building all these systems that only they control because we, after all, are the people.
Right.
There's pathologies associated with the lower right as well as the upper left. But what you're trying to do as a leader is destabilize that false axis that runs from upper left to lower right. This is terrible to do it just on audio because we can't draw it.
No, I can see it. Yeah, I can see it in my mind. Yeah.
Most organizations live most of the time on this false axis from upper left to lower right, and this contest between the people who are currently benefiting from the coercive normal and the people who have frustrated potential who are like, no, we count. What we value matters, but you're not listening to us. And the fight and the flight and all the ways people try to negotiate that is what you wrestle with, when in fact you want to be on this up and to the right kind of trajectory where both are growing. Because actually, to have a great business, you do want profits and you want people. But to get both at the same time requires really kind of thoughtful interventions. So that's a little more on how I've come to see this just over and over as kind of unlocking insight into what we're really facing when we're dealing with these, when we feel stuck. It's usually because we're on the false axis.
But then no one wants to or actively believes they're in the bottom left. So like, what locates anyone there? Like, everyone wants to believe they're doing something. So the absence of
this
all
is
things
interesting.
Feels weird.
Right. So, in Strong and Weak, when I'm talking about authority and vulnerability, I call the lower left corner, these days, it's not actually in the book quite in this way, but I call it safety. That's where you have neither authority nor
I see.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I would actually say it's actually where human lives are meant to begin. Like we begin as babies without a lot of authority, really. Capacity for meaningful action is how I define that. But our parents and the community around us, to the extent they can, insulate us from from a lot of vulnerability.
Right.
We don't feel unsafe, we hope, ideally.
Right.
But we're meant to grow out of that, right? You're meant to move up in authority and out, you might say, in vulnerability at the same time. But there's another name for that lower left corner, which is withdrawal, which is where you actually try to escape a system that you feel is oppressive or dangerous for you. And I actually think a lot of people end up in that corner. So it is a sort of passive corner because it's low on both values. You aren't contributing, but you're safe there. And what often happens as the conflicts of the false axis play out, that is the people who benefit from the course of normal are fighting with the people who represent frustrated potential. Other actors in the system, or especially sometimes the people in the lower right, they actually flee to the safety corner. They're like, well, you know what? Like we have this thing that I don't know how much it's actually happening, but it's at least been the subject of lots of articles in the business press called quiet quitting, where people allegedly they're still collecting their paycheck and they're still turning in something that resembles work, but they're so disillusioned in the system that they're part of and the way it treats them that they're like, you know what, I am actually completely checked out.
Totally.
I think that's actually super common.
Yes.
That's also, that's when, among other things, people leave your church, right? They're withdrawing from your church and they are going somewhere probably where they feel more safe, whether it's, I don't know, sleeping in on Sunday or another church down the road that doesn't have that same conflict going on.
Right.
And at least from their point of view. Right. So I actually think that lower left corner is very well populated.
Yes.
In almost every human system. And in my own life. This is also a diagnostic for my own life. Like, what do I tend to do when I'm faced with the need for growth and the need to embrace a value, the subordinate value that I've been neglecting? That's almost always riskier than whatever I've been doing up until that point. And I can either choose growth or I can be like, you know what? I'm just going to back away, visualize Homer Simpson, backing into the hedge, right? I'm just sort of checking out here. So that corner has plenty of action.
Well, I agree. And I would say you identified the Vineyard a moment earlier. But in our leadership conversations, a lot of what we've been talking about as we've been thinking about flexibility and structure, for example, is that maybe by the size or the growth or the temperament of the kinds of leaders that we've attracted or built with, what my experience would be is that it isn't often a yes or a no vote towards anything we're trying to do by way of leadership. It's a shrug. It's not a no. It's not a yes.
Not opposition even.
No, just a shrug. It's a shrug. Like,
that's the lower left.
What could be done? Who knows? I guess that's what they're doing. It isn't, there's not the fireworks. There's not strong agreement. It's basically like, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever. And part of in my opinion, yeses and nos, leaders know what to do with a lot of times. Like, I build with my yeses, even though sometimes your yeses aren't really yeses. And I know how to oppose the no's and help kind of bring them along.
Or persuade or whatever.
Yeah, I'm going to work toward what's really going on here. And do they have a fair objection? And, we should accommodate that. Or actually, we're not accommodating that because of this or whatever. You're in dialogue.
Yeah.
It's the shrug. It's the, where are these people? What are they thinking? What did happen? I think out of COVID, most painful experience for pastors was people just weren't there anymore.
Yes.
They weren't mad.
Yes.
They just drifted away. And so the weird experience of a pastor following up with someone and they go, I don't know. We just hadn't been in church a while. And so we thought to ourselves, maybe we should try something else. We've been wondering that anyway. Oh, so you're not upset? Not really. Oh, well, could we have a conversation about it? It feels like we should have had a conversation about that. I thought our commitment to one another was stronger than that, where I thought we kind of had a way we would have processed that, and the realization that they weren't mad.
Wow.
They just shrugged. They just did
just
something else.
indifferent, which is way worse. Although, yes. Although so often underneath that is
yes.
There is often anger, but there's also often, it's not just anger, it's fear. It's ultimately a rejection of growth because, maybe that person or family or whatever, maybe they are meant to take some risks and move into a different church environment.
Totally.
But my gosh, do it for the sake of growth. Do it and do it honestly and directly and with a kind of transparency and a blessing rather than just kind of drifting. But listen, I actually think the lower left is like where America. So it's safe. One of the biggest problems of being a pastor in our world right now is people want to it's kind of true of leadership in many settings. People want you to tell them that if you lead them, they will be one of two things, and they interact. One, either up and to the left, which basically means in control with things the way you like it, or the lower left, which is safe. We'll be safe, and not we'll be flourishing, we'll be taking risks, we'll be like putting ourselves out there, we'll be suffering, but growing, and every system wants its leaders to say, I'm going to take you really specifically to the upper left that is control so that we can live in the lower left, which is safety. Right. If you give me power, I will make us safe to be who we want to be with no risk.
Yes.
And without that pesky subordinate value, whatever it is, right, that we want to flee from because we don't value, when push comes to shove, we're not sure it's good for us. So can I give you one more layer to this? So yeah,
please.
So this was like another just crazy thing that happened is I was talking with a friend about this and my friend said about this kind of this universal 2x2. He said, the three false corners. So this would be the upper left, which let's call it control or the coercive normal, the lower left, which is always going to be kind of the null safety corner, and then the lower right, which is the frustrated potential corner. He said, these correspond to the three offices of leadership in Israel. So Israel has three kind of categories of people who are anointed and appointed by God to lead: the prophet, the priest, and the king. So what do? It turns out they address the three broken corners. So the prophet goes to the people benefiting from the coercive normal. And part of why I use that word coercive is there is often injustice associated with maintaining that dominant value. Yeah. And the prophet confronts the people who are currently benefiting from it. And, as we say about prophets, they foretell and they forthtell. That is, they both speak what the future is going to be if this idolatry stays in place. And they just speak forth the truth about it. Nathan going to David saying, you're the guy stealing the one sheep of the poor neighbor, and what they do is create a pathway for repentance. That is, I have valued this dominant thing and I've neglected the subordinate thing, but the prophet through prophetic intervention sort of speaks the word of the Lord to me in such a way that I kind of wake up from my dream of power and realize I need to embrace this other thing. And it gives me a path back to the right, basically. What does the priest do? The priest in Israel, of course, the function of the priest is to help you come into the presence of God, which you can't normally do on your own. Mm-hmm. And I see that as the priest kind of meeting you in the lower right, the frustration of you are an image bearer of God, but you're also separated from God. The priest meets you there and kind of lifts you up and makes it possible for you to come to God with your thanksgiving and your petition. Mm. And so more generally, the priestly role goes to the frustrated potential corner, the people and the values that have been neglected, and raises them up with a kind of authority in the system. And then there's the king, right? So there's this line actually that leads into the Bathsheba story in the spring of the year when kings go out to war. So that's an act going back to authority and vulnerability of both, right? The king leads the people out, but the king is also at the head of the army. While David stays behind in Jerusalem. He is actually in the safety corner because of his power, his upper left authority. He can just opt out of risk and send the people off to war without him going. And there he's lured into violation and sin. But the king is meant to live this flourishing life before the people that is so compelling that you wouldn't want to stay in the lower left corner. So the trick of leadership these days, I think, is now Jesus comes and he's all three, right? So he speaks prophetically, he lives kind of kingly because he is the true king, and he's incredibly priestly, he's incredibly attentive to those who have been overlooked and neglected. And the great gift and burden of Christian leadership is we also probably are called to play all three. But the one that has been most fatally substituted for in our world is this sort of royal role. I'll say that rather than just kingly, because men and women can both live this kind of royal function of like living a full life in front of people so that they see there's more to life than you imagined.
Yeah.
But my friend who gave me the prophet, priest, king said, oh, but we no longer have kings, we have celebrities.
Yeah.
And a celebrity is someone who lives in public a very spectacular life, but not the kind of life you can join. It's a life you just observe from the safe distance of your couch through your screen in the lower left corner of safety. You watch the celebrity living this incredible life, but you don't get invited into that. That celebrity doesn't think you can become them. Whereas the king is the representative of the people. The king actually leads the people into the fullness of worship and proper dominion over the land and right relationships and justice and all this stuff that everyone participates in. Celebrities do not do that.
Yeah.
So we have this, and this is true within the church, we have this incredible like overabundance of celebrities who sometimes are very impressive Christians in some sense, but the effect they have on people is we just watch them, which is not meant to be the function of the royal function that invites us out of our withdrawal and our safety into the life that we're really meant for.
That's good.
Yeah. So then you look at any 2x2 and you say, what's the prophetic move needed here? What's the priestly kind of intercession and compassion needed here? And what's the royal kind of willingness to live something very compelling out in front of people that will, in a sense, raise the stakes for them and call them into the life that we're really meant for?
Vineyard USA's Women's Association is hosting a conference at the Evanston Vineyard in the Chicago area from Thursday, October 2nd to Saturday, October 4th. We were made for more than just survival. God's invitation to his kingdom is greater, deeper, and more mysterious than we could ever imagine. The church needs women pastors and leaders to know their worth, take their rightful place, and boldly ask for more grace, more mercy, more compassion, and more courage to speak the truth of Jesus to a lonely and confused world. Come and join hundreds of women who dare to believe that God has more for their churches, their cities, and their own lives. The cost for the conference is just $99, and you can find more information at vineyardusa.org/events. Hope to see you there.
Yeah, bring them into something. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and it is a good segue in that you just mentioned the sort of role of technology in that. So you said, in safety, I'm watching a screen. And so the sort of negative impact of being able to watch people do amazing things.
Yeah.
And hear their stories and make their stories our own stories. And like, you might even, the amount of times now that I'm even watching in church, people telling a pastor's story as though it's sort of their own.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Like, gosh, Tim Keller did tell this incredible story. Like while you're in a Bible study,
Right. Yeah.
man, I heard this great story from this one preacher, to illustrate
Wow.
this.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
like,
Oh, wow.
this is so different than when I was leading Bible studies even 20 years ago.
Interesting. Yes.
They might quote a book. They might say, well, I read this thing John Piper wrote, or I read this thing.
For sure.
Well, but now the proliferation of it and the sort of full orb experience of it, like watching someone tell the story, or maybe even watching the video of the thing that they're telling the story of.
Yes.
They inhabit it in a way that's sort of like theirs. Like I somehow feel like I did this. and the amount of work I do in a Bible study or even preaching to say, but what does that mean for you? So you just gave me a good quote, or you told me an interesting thing you saw on YouTube. Right. Tell me what that means. Like, how are you inhabiting that? And everyone just kind of falls silent. Like, gosh, I don't know. Because I'm vicariously experiencing something that's full orbed in a way that I feel like I've done that now. I've done that. I've lived that experience.
Wow.
No, you haven't. Like, you just haven't. I'm not sure that's forming you the way you think it is.
Well, can I actually put a gloss on that? I think the rise of visual media probably does, if I can speculate a bit, activate this incredible parallel system we have called our mirror neurons, right? So when I observe another person or a creature, it doesn't have to, it could be a squirrel, performing an action, it actually activates neural pathways in my brain that are parallel to what it would be like for me to do it. And I don't think I'd have to talk to like some neuroscientists about this to be sure. I think when you read about something, there is a kind of translation that doesn't involve the mirror neurons. It involves your imagination. So reading activates your imagination for sure, but it doesn't activate. I can't picture how it would activate that immediate, unreflective, completely unconscious. Like if I watch you pick up your coffee cup, I don't have to like have any imagination that you're lifting your coffee. My mirror neurons immediately perform inside my mind the same thing that you are actually doing with your body. So if you write about picking up your coffee cup, I have to exercise imagination. But if I watch a video of you picking up your coffee cup, there is no imagination required. So I actually think you're saying to people, well, but you didn't actually experience that like that. But in a way they did.
Yeah, exactly. They also did that, right, in their minds. It felt,
they went through the mind-body kind of experience with everything except the actual emotion.
Yes.
And I wouldn't want to say there's no place for that, except that I do think it's almost axiomatic that which we simply watch does not form us. Because it doesn't. I mean, you and I can both pick up a coffee cup, but if I watch you, do you play an instrument? I don't actually know.
I don't know. I know you do now, but no, I don't. I play sports. I've always been a sports guy. Yeah. So.
Okay. Perfect. Because I don't play sports or not well. All right. So what was your favorite sport?
I love to play golf. That's my favorite thing now, but I grew up playing tennis. Yeah.
Okay. Tennis or golf. All right. Let's just do golf. I mean, I can watch you play golf all day and admire you, and it will activate some mirror neurons, but I will not be one iota better at playing golf by watching you golf. What I have to do to play golf is have you actually stand with me, teach me, watch me not do it very well, give me incremental steps, like all the thing you do learning anything, whether it's sports or an instrument or whatever.
Right.
There's nothing formative about observing, even though it can be very compelling. Like we can feel like we're really, and it is compelling. And I don't think it's all wrong, because I actually think the point of watching someone else do something at a really high level is to be invited into a formative life. So one of the things I talk about with technology is the difference between pressing play, like on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, and playing a violin. Like if I say, hey, let's play some music, what does that mean? Does it mean let's put on some speakers and play it electronically? Or does it mean let's sit down and play instruments? Well, these days, if you say let's play some music, like 99% of the time, effectively, if you look like what's happening in our world, it means music will come through speakers into our ears, either little white speakers in our ears or speakers in the room. Well, you will never learn to become a musician by playing music in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But then the question is, why does anyone play the violin anymore? Because it is really hard to play the violin. Like it's a really long journey. Having accompanied two small children who the sound of whose playing caused me somewhat more pain than I ever let them see at that early formative stage. Like, why would you ever do that? The answer is you only do it if you've heard a violinist who plays really well, especially as a child with that amazing kind of irrepressible like confidence almost of the child and humility of the child, willingness to learn and try. You're like, I want to learn how to do that. That's the function of spectation being a spectator, is to say, oh my gosh, I watched Jay play golf and I think I'll actually take up that sport because it was beautiful what he was able to do. Now, in fact, I know enough about golf to never want to learn it, Jay. But now tennis, I haven't ever really learned tennis. I took a few lessons years ago. I should learn that. And if I watched a great tennis player play, it should activate in me. Yeah, I should go out and find someone just a little better than me and just learn the next step and play.
Yes.
But instead, of course, what our media world gives us are these highly salient, the way the psychologists talk about it, emotionally rich experiences of observing, but that in that celebrity way do not cross the gap into inviting us into a formative life that would make us the kind of person who could do that. And that is the deepest tragedy of media is this, it just gives us every day a way to live vicariously through other people in a way that will never develop anything in us that could contribute good to the world or take us really closer to loving with heart, soul, mind, and strength, the way we're meant to do.
Well, and now with the sort of development and the immersive experience of video games,
yes,
you can have the sense that you're doing things.
Yes,
I did take a risk. I did feel some sort of a rush that I broke in through the ceiling of this building and rescued the whatever.
Yes. So
talk about that. What's happening?
I call this shallow mastery. What video games offer you, it is so interesting. It is a formative experience to become adept at any video game. You start out a beginner. You've maybe seen, these days you've watched people on Twitch or whatever, and you've seen kind of the great players, and then you're like, I want to learn how to play that, right? It's the exact same thing as happens to that 8-year-old who wants to learn the violin or whatever. But the problem is the initial difficulty is not that great, and the reward at the end is commensurately not that great. You've mastered a virtual world, but virtual worlds are like infinitely easier, simpler, and less high stakes than the actual world God gave us as his image bearers responsibility for.
Yeah.
They are thin simulations of what it is to be human. To this point, almost always just two-dimensional. Eventually they will feel three-dimensional, but they will just be pixels. They are not the real thing, and they do not translate to the real thing. And it's very asymmetric. So I hear that NFL football players love to play Madden football. And I bet, I don't know this for sure, but I bet they are very good at Madden football, because if you are good on an actual football gridiron, you will know a lot of things that will get you quickly up to speed playing Madden football. It does not work the other way.
Totally.
You can play Madden football all season on your couch with your buddies, and if we put you out on an actual football field, you are not going to be ready at all, because it's too easy. But it has given you that sensation that you are growing and moving toward flourishing. But it's so shallow. So this is why video games are way worse for boys than social media is for girls. So
say more about that.
The digital world is messing up both men and women, but in very different ways and with very different lasting impacts. So let's start with girls, actually. So the primary way girls enter the digital world is to engage in social activity. It's not just social media. It's also like texting and group chats and that kind of thing. But social media is a big part of it. And so what is that about? It's about mastery of relationships. It's about figuring out how to be part of a group, ideally, frankly, how to dominate or be prominent in a group, how to be influential in a group. It's all the negotiations and so forth that go into that. And girls are very motivated to be part of groups and to have friends and to be prominent among their groups of friends, all this stuff. So social media gives you a way to do that in the virtual world, a shallow way to do it. Let's go over to video games for a second. What boys primarily, I don't want to overgeneralize. I'm talking about population level trait or generalizations. And I recognize that it's not true of every boy, just like not every girl is motivated, but it is, I think it's just undeniable. There's something different about girls and boys. And what boys tend to be motivated by is to demonstrate mastery of the physical world, not the relational world, but they want to show other boys they can do things that are kind of impressive, physically impressive. This is why athletes, boys do gravitate to sports very often, though girls, of course, can enjoy and excel at sports too. So the video game gives the boy a way to do that. The problem is these do not lead to the same outcome. So in two ways. The first is what girls are doing on social media has an analog in real life communication, because it is the fact is we do use words a lot to negotiate our social relationships, and we do sort of modulate our image and use kind of our image the way that you use your image on social media. You do that in person with people too, and girls have to learn that and figure out how to handle that. What they are learning has a kind of applicability to the social world they're going to enter as adults, especially because they're going to enter kind of the world of these days of a lot of jobs are pretty much on email and video. So they're preparing for the way relationships really work. There's like a close analogy, even though social media is more shallow and adolescent social media is terrible. And I would not wish it on any girl. And I wish my own daughter hadn't had to experience it. And so does she. And that leads to the second thing. Frankly, what girls experience on social media is a whole lot of suffering. It's painful. It's way more. Being rejected on social media is more painful than being rejected in person. And people reject each other more harshly and terribly on mediated ways than they would ever do if they actually had to say it to your face or treat you that way to your face.
Yes.
It creates incredible suffering for girls. But suffering produces character. And what happens is girls age out of this terrible adolescent thing we've abandoned them to called girl social media. And they've learned some tough things through the terrible experiences they've had. And they're mature because of that suffering as they enter their adult lives. What's happening over here in the world of the boys? First of all, the virtual simulation they're experiencing is not preparing them for any physical analog. The fact that you can be a Navy SEAL in whatever Navy SEAL video game you're playing, it's actually every hour you spend playing that is making it less likely you can qualify just even physically, right, to be a Navy SEAL. So you're getting massively underprepared for the real world you're about to enter, and you are not suffering. You're having the time of your life. Positive sort of consumer experiences do not form us. They don't form character. So what do you have? You have girls who mature out of the terrible adolescent experience into actually a high degree of maturity afterwards with relevant skills for the real social world they're entering. Boys don't mature out because they've had no forcing function for maturity, which is suffering and difficulty and resistance and friction. And they have no skills. Right. And this explains why, if you look at mental health, adolescent boys' mental health is not terrible. Now, it's worse than it used to be, but it's not terrible. Adolescent girls' mental health is legitimately terrible right now. But young women are doing very well, and young men are doing terribly. So terrible for girls, not so bad for young women, not so bad for boys. Boys are pretty happy playing video games. Terrible for young men, which means terrible for women, because most young women want to find a partner for life who will be a man. And they're like, where are the guys? And the answer is they've been playing video games that did nothing to prepare them for the life they're really made for. So that's how it's working right now.
Well, and I like the shallow mastery thought. I mean, I'd heard, I'm trying to dial it up. I can't remember exactly where, but there was a podcast where they were making an argument, use Madden as an example, where people were saying, oh, no, Madden doesn't necessarily prepare us to play football really well, but we could be like coaches in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
And we have the ability to see how moving parts work and control those parts in particular ways. But then the person responded and said, that's not true because coaches can't control players. So like the coach can't literally like mind meld with the quarterback
Right.
and tell them where to throw it live. So coaches have to learn a set of skills to prepare human beings.
Yes.
And learn how to be with people and see their limitations and prepare them for moments. And you're not doing any of that. You get to just instantly make everyone do what you want them to do.
Wow.
Which doesn't translate into the real world.
Well, that was the main thing I thought. I'm like, I do not think anyone whose only experience in football was being like top 10 Madden football player in the world would survive first contact with a locker room of a football team. Like, hi guys, I'm here to be your coach. My qualification is I'm like number 8 in the world in Madden football.
Exactly.
Why are those guys going to respect you? I mean, obviously not all coaches have been like top level players themselves, but they've all taken massive physical risks of some kind.
Yes.
They are conditioned. They're serious about the sport.
Yes.
I just can't think of any exception to that. Who are the people who are going to be your little automatons? Exactly.
Totally. They're not going to just, first of all, you're unable to do that. Second, even if you could, would they do that? They probably wouldn't.
They would not.
So it's a serious problem of translation of skills because, even the military has learned we can use video games to prepare people in particular ways for particular scenarios.
I can imagine that. Yeah.
But we still have to train them. We still have to put things in their hands and run them around. Even the mapping of their minds doesn't train them.
Oh, completely.
So Andy, you've written about this extensively. People should read your books to this end. But what's the general wisdom? So I'm a parent. I have a kid who's going to school, and everyone got their phones, and what am I supposed, should my kid's 12, or now they're 14, now they're 16. And the claim of every kid is everyone else, everybody gets to watch that movie. Everybody gets to play this game. Everybody has this. Everyone has that. You don't. And why do we have to be the weird people again, or whatever, right? So there's some of that's just social dynamics with parenting, but some of it is just what is the sort of ammunition for a parent or what helps them make better decisions other than obviously read your book, which I think they should. We'll put that in the show notes. But what are you seeing? What do you think is helpful as you're just living the real world and you have kids yourself? So
yeah, we raised 2. They're now in their 20s, and I will say they are far more radical in limiting and thoughtful about how they use their devices. Well, way more than I was in my 20s, and frankly, way more than I am today. Like my daughter doesn't use any media that has an algorithmic kind of dimension. She's like, the algorithm catches me at my worst. I don't want it to reinforce my worst. And she won't use, so she's not on a bunch of platforms, Instagram, TikTok, and so forth that have algorithmic feeds. So here's the main thing I would say, based on a lot of observation, though not exhaustive, I guess. If you are not afraid, you cannot be too radical. Now, and here's why I say if you're not afraid is important. Parents who draw boundaries out of fear that their kid's going to get messed up in something, fear that their kid's not going to be a Christian, fear it corrupts the proper boundary setting that is the task of one of the tasks of parenting. So you have to be rooted and grounded in love enough that love has cast out fear. I mean, I'm not saying that it's wrong to, anticipate and grieve the way our children would be hurt if they went down a path that's not good for them. I'm not saying don't be aware of that, but I've seen parenting, fear-based parenting that is therefore controlling. It's therefore very brittle. It doesn't know how to recover when things go wrong, and kids just can sense it, and it's very suffocating in a way. So if you are not afraid, so the first thing is like just to somehow through prayer, through community, come to just trust that God loves your kids more than you love your kids. Then you cannot set boundaries that are too radical where you'll be like, oh, we kind of went too far. Because I have met families who are just, I know a family who do not have Wi-Fi in their house, who heat their home with wood. They live in Wheaton, Illinois, which is like this nice suburban community where everyone has like 2.5 kids and a Porsche and a, whatever, like very nice community. And this family lives a completely countercultural life, by the way, with something like 9 children. I've lost count of how many children this couple has had. And their kids are the healthiest, many of them are now college age and beyond, healthiest, happiest, most grounded, most socially popular, most successful in the things they've chosen to put their lives to. And my friends have made a set of choices that, frankly, to me and my family are like, you've got to be kidding. Like, we need Wi-Fi. But I have never seen an emotionally healthy family who set boundaries that they themselves or I looking in would say, oh, you know what, that's a little too much. What I have seen is a lot of people trying to draw some middle ground, because, well, obviously we need to have a way to pick them up from soccer practice or whatever, that actually end up with very suboptimal results. Yeah. So you can't be there. There's a great book actually that we're speaking here in this summer of 2025. It just came out called The Tech Exit. By Claire Morrill. I'd love for you to put this in the show notes. And Claire has found a whole bunch of families who have freed their kids and their whole family from smartphones until the kids leave home. And she makes a very systematic case for why this is best, and then gives you a very beautiful roadmap for how to do it in a faithful way. She herself is a Christian. The book is written for everybody. It's not a Christian book, but it's a fabulous book. And I wrote a book called The Tech Wise Family that I would also recommend. But honestly, that was 8 years ago, and the evidence is just now compelling that these mediated experiences just basically rob us, our children, us as families, from the formative things that we're meant for. Yeah. And so for me, in the formative environments of home, school, and church, which are the 3 places where we're really taken as total beginners in life, including when we start parenting, we're total beginners at that, and formed into people who can love with heart, soul, mind, and strength, I think we should absolutely categorically minimize the magical devices. Now, you go to work, and I understand a lot of people work from home. I do too. And there I use a lot of technology because I'm not at work to be formed. I'm at work to express into the world the goodness that I've been made by God to be able to offer to the world through experiences that did not involve technology and in contexts that were not saturated with it. So homeschool and church are the 3 places where I just think we should keep the digital at bay. And then we can go use it in all kinds of fruitful ways out in the world and in other dimensions.
Yeah. And as you're describing, I mean, there is so much research at this point. We were behind for a long time because we didn't have enough time with this stuff to kind of know the impact or to see the new development in technology. I mean, you would know more than me since you work in these worlds, but I don't think I've found anyone make a strong positive case for unmitigated technological experience. I've not seen one yet.
I will give you the crazy thing. So I've had the privilege a little bit of collaborating with Jonathan Haidt on some things. He wrote this other very important book called The Ancient Generation, which he really wrote at the moment when we did have enough data. Because after I published my book, the first question, and every time I gave a talk, someone would raise their hand and say, what does the evidence show? And I'd say, look, social science evidence is very hard to accumulate. Like, it takes a long time, correlation and causation and all this stuff.
Yep.
Well, John and Zach Roush and other collaborators have now assembled like the definitive documenting of how much we know. And they put out a call a couple years ago. They're like, look, there's got to be a Gen Z person out there, like a young person, who can give us a positive case, and we'll publish it. They run this really good Substack about this. They're like, please, somebody submit a story. No one has submitted. There are no Gen Z people who are like, oh, this is just all upside. Stop being so uptight. Now, I know your 13-year-old says that when they're angling for the smartphone.
Yes.
But there's no like college student who can put together an argument with or without the help of AI that this is like just beneficial. They all feel robbed. My daughter is volunteering with the youth ministry Young Life, and I don't think there's anything confidential about this story because there's no names or kids identifying things. She said that they did this beautiful student parent banquet that they do kind of every spring, and they had the middle schoolers write notes to their parents anonymously just to say what they wish their parents knew about their lives. And she said, Dad, it was so heartbreaking because what all the middle schoolers wanted their parents to know, they were like, I want you to know how terrible it is. You don't know how hard my life is. You don't know how sad I am. You don't know how addicted I am to my devices. And just kid after kid writes these heartbreaking letters to and these are parents who want their kids to thrive and are showing up at a Young Life banquet. And the kids themselves know this is not working. The problem is, like all of us, they have impulse control issues and addiction issues, and the whole social world around them is not making it easy. So I think we've got, every kid needs to hear from their parents from day one, as soon as they can understand these words. Our family is different. and then you need to know a few other families who are different. And then you need to band together and say, we're going to be different against the tide because it's better. And hard now means good later, whereas easy now is going to mean hard later. And you just have to choose that and find a few other people to choose it with. And eventually, to some extent, our culture is going to catch up because the evidence is so compelling. But I will say also, I think we can get phones out of schools, which I think is going to happen in the next few years.
Yep.
We can do a bunch of like sort of limiting activities as a society. It's not going to touch the heart of the matter, which is, have people seen a royal life? Have they seen something worth like pursuing that's going to require heart, soul, mind, and strength? And I don't see our culture as a whole being able to hold that out for kids, just given where we are. I see us holding out a lot of bad models. And that's where you need the church. And that's where we have this incredible adventure to go on as followers of Jesus. And we have people who really are doing it in our world in the name of Jesus. I get to every day be with some of them through the entrepreneurs that I work with. Like, go find those people, apprentice yourself to those people. Everybody apprenticing ourselves, of course, to Jesus. And that is compelling, will be compelling for kids. And between the time when you realize this is necessary and the time when they say thank you, just be the parent and be an adult and bear the suffering because there will come a time when they say thank you.
Well, and if you're not making your kid upset at all, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know. I mean, that's your job. That's part of your job. Maybe you didn't know that was your job. That's part of your job. So you're already going to upset them. Now the question is, for what, how often, to what end? Exactly. That's it.
Will it be out of love or out of fear?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, so my daughter and I wrote a book together. It's mostly her book called My Tech-Wise Life, where she writes about her own experiences growing up and making choices in a world of devices. And so we did all these talks together, which is amazing. She wrote it when she was 19. So we kind of done the past few years. She's 25 now. And you watch these videos or talk that we do in person, and I think you'll think like, oh my gosh, she adores her dad. He adores her. Like it's
never any conflict. They're always in agreement. Yeah, right.
If only you could have seen the eye rolls, the just like resistance for years in her teenage years, even while we all the time had on the whole a fine relationship. But oh my gosh, so many moments where she's like, Dad, and worse. But now, like, we're on the other side of that.
Right.
And our kids are our best friends in the world, are our two kids and our daughter-in-law.
Great kids.
So yeah, there's better out there for all of us than we're currently probably even aware, right? So let's go.
That's right.
Let's go after it.
But it requires, hard now, easy later, easy now, hard later.
Yeah.
It turns out that there we go. Hey, we're in another 2x2 grid, maybe. But wait, there.
Yeah, I would say hard now, good later. I won't say easy later.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. Good.
But
that's
good.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. No, that's so good. Well, Andy, I took a lot of your time, as I always do, and you've been so gracious. We are so grateful for you and so grateful for your investment in the Vineyard. And, I hope everybody grabs the different material we just talked about, because it is just so helpful. So grateful for the work you do. So we pray for you. We're grateful for you. And maybe someday, I can't imagine the scenario by which it would happen. We could be helpful to you. I can't foresee how, but someday we would be.
Not at all. It already happens in countless ways. So.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for you. Thank you for making time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
The We Are Vineyard podcast is a production from the team at Vineyard USA. If you've been enjoying the podcast, here are a few ways you can help us. Leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Connect with us online for additional resources. Our website is vineyardusa.org, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Vineyard USA. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.